The views expressed in this program do not necessarily reflect those of this station.
Welcome to Insights into Northeast Michigan, a WBKB News public affairs program. Insights deals with the issues affecting those in the community, as well as Northeast Michigan and the state. And now, Insights into Northeast Michigan.
Welcome everyone to another edition of Insights. I'm Bethany Richardi here on the Chinook, joined with Jim Johnson, a retired station manager at the DNR Fisheries Research Station in Alpena, and also a Besser Museum Board of Trustee. Thank you so much for being here.
It's a pleasure.
So, do you want to tell me a little bit about the history of the boat that we're sitting on right now?
Well, the history's a long one. This boat was built originally for the DNR Law Enforcement Division in 1947. And it served as a law enforcement boat, basically enforcing commercial fishing laws and monitoring commercial fishing catches until 1968, when the DNR decided to start managing the Great Lakes for sport fishing. And it was rechristened the Chinook, which were just at that time being stocked for the first time in the Great Lakes. And it became the Lake Huron Fishery Research Station's survey vessel. Back in the 1950s, the boat was actually cut in two and lengthened to 50 feet. And no, that was more recently, excuse me. That was after it was turned over to the Fisheries Division. It was lengthened. And then it was modified with gillnet lifter and trawling equipment so that it could do the fishery survey work that it has done right up until last month. And as of last month, it was the oldest survey vessel of all the Great Lakes.
So do you want to tell me a little bit about the crew that works on the boat and what it looks like when you're out on Lake Huron?
Okay, yeah, and when you're fishing nets, it takes a crew of 5 or 6 people. You have the captain and the assistant captain running the boat and watching out for other vessels and making sure the boat is safely navigated, and then you have 3 people basically managing the lifting of the nets and working up the fish as we go along. And the captain and the assistant captain lend a hand whenever they can too with the fish workup. So we all work together when we can, and usually a crew of 5 can do it. Some surveys will be setting gill nets, other surveys will be lifting these gill nets, which are like a fence that lays in the bottom of the lake, but they're invisible to the fish, so they swim into the mesh and get tangled up. And then you raise the net and count the number of fish. And one of the metrics we use is the number of target fish, say lake trout, per mile of net that we caught. And then with trawling, we drag what looks like a sock behind the boat, and it picks up off the bottom of the lake small fish. That's how we get a handle on reproduction and how many little fish there are in Lake Huron and how much reproduction there is for lake trout and whitefish and that sort of thing. But the real work begins too when the fish get back to the office, and we've extracted bony structures from them so that we can age the fish, determine how old each fish is in the catch. We do diet analysis. What have they been eating? Are the alewives up? Are the alewives down? Sometimes the best way to find out is to see what's in the stomachs. When the alewives collapse, what do they eat now? Are they switching to eating whitefish? Not a good thing, because whitefish are important for the commercial fishery. Are they eating perch and walleyes? Yeah, they were eating a lot of perch. And that wasn't a good thing, because now the perch fisheries become a forage fish instead of a sport fish. We learned these things from this boat. The most important thing that we monitored, though, was number of lamprey wounds. Sea lampreys are an invasive parasite that attach to the fish, and they're basically a vampire, sucking the blood from the fish and leaving a great big bloody hole where they had attacked. Often the fish dies from the attack, but sometimes they survive the attack. And so we measure the number of these wounds that were inflicted in the current year and use a formula to determine what the mortality rate caused by lampreys was the previous year. And up until about 2000, that mortality rate was way high in Lake Huron. And we were able to direct sea lamprey control to the real problem, and fortunately the state and the federal government got together and upped the sea lamprey control budget and got better control on Lake Huron. After 2000, we saw those wounds drop dramatically. We watched lake trout numbers grow, we watched them get older and start to spawn. Now we're watching lake trout reproduce.
And you figured this all out with using this boat?
This boat was crucial to that. We
Yeah.
also found, using our trawling equipment, that when alewives collapsed, they're another invasive fish, but they're a forage fish that only gets about this big. Everybody was eating alewives. But when they collapsed, suddenly walleyes reproduced. And we found the walleye reproduction was just astronomical in Saginaw Bay the year they collapsed. Turns out the alewives must have been eating the walleye fry when the walleye were only about this big. And as soon as they were released from this pressure of alewives, the walleye population came back. And using this boat and the boat from Lake St. Clair together on Saginaw Bay, we were able to conclude that walleye were completely recovered by 2006.
So now that she's retired, what are the next steps for her?
Well, that's going to be some interesting times. The boat has a tremendous story to tell, and our objective is to tell that story at the Besser Museum. We don't have any money. The Besser Museum is entirely supported by donations and by endowments. It's not supported directly by millages or government support. We do get some grants, and we'll definitely be panhandling for grants, and if we're successful, we'll use those grants to build a Chinook display to go alongside the Catherine V display that's already there. Clarence Cross, Tuffy, is also, he's the lead on the Catherine V display. That's a commercial fishing boat of an early era. And this boat will be used to describe the changes that occurred over time in the fishery.
Awesome. So do you want to tell me a little bit about the engine here? I remember when we were out taking her last voyage the other day, that was a big significant part of it. Do you want to tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, this engine in this boat is one of the workhorses of the diesel engine industry. GM's 671 diesels powered so much equipment during World War II. They were crucial to landing craft and other, they were such a utility engine. They're a lightweight two-stroke diesel engine, which means they fire on every, just like your two-stroke lawnmower, they fire on every stroke. They're not made anymore. They changed the name to Detroit Diesel in about 1954, but this is one of the old, it says GM Diesel on it, and it was, the original diesel was put in this boat around 1950 or 52, somewhere in there. And then the original block wore out, and we found at Alpena Diesel, they offered, hey, we've got an old 671 block in a fire truck we have sitting out back. Why don't we put that in the... So we took this engine apart, took the water jackets off, put the 671 block from the fire engine in there. That's a 1954 fire engine, I believe. Wow. And put it all back together, and it's still running great. This engine is extremely reliable, and that's one of the things you can say about GM 671s is they're a very, very reliable workhorse. And you need a reliable engine when you only have one. Right. The new boat we have, the Tanner, sitting next to us here, has 2 engines, 2 steering systems, 2 transmissions. Everything's redundant, so if one system goes out, you still have the other.
And that's the one that's replacing her,
That's the one that's replacing this. Yeah, if this engine dies, you're stranded.
Yeah, out in a big Lake Huron.
Yep, and that's the nice thing about the 671s is they were so reliable, they were so tough, they just kept running and running.
Well, it definitely sounds like she has a story to tell, and I appreciate you sharing some of it with us.
Thank you.
Awesome. And don't go anywhere because we'll be right back with more. Welcome back, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. We're still out by the Thunder Bay River. I'm joined now with Tuffy Cross, a retired boat captain of the Chinook. Thank you so much for being here.
You're welcome.
So do you want to tell me a little bit about your history on this boat? You've worked on it for over 30 years, right?
Yeah, I started in 1971, in May of 1971. The state was looking for people to operate the boat and make nets, and I was the net maker in the commercial fishery at one time. I was a commercial fisherman from 1954 until '69 when we were put out of business. So the state knew I was a commercial fisherman, and they came after me to see if I wanted a job on the boat making nets and taking care of their gear. So in 1971 I joined them. I was going to be here for about 3 years and move on, but it lasted 31.5 years.
A little longer than expected.
Longer than expected. It was a good job. Lots of opportunities to enjoy yourself on the lake and do things that was important to the state.
So what was your main goal and your duties on this boat?
My main duties was I first mate on the boat. My cousin Bill Cross was the captain at the time. And so him and I sailed together on the boat for about 26 years. And he was the captain, I was responsible for all the gear on the boat and making the nets and making sure we have the right gear for the operations that we were doing up and down the lake. We made about 5 or 6 different trips up and down the lake, either gill netting or trawling or working down in Saginaw Bay on walleyes. And also in the spring we used to plant all the lake trout. We could haul one tank, we had a big tank that went on the boat here, and we could load one tank at a time and take them out to plant the lake trout. So we usually made about 3 trips a day with different, trucks coming in at every 2 hours or 3 hours, so we could run back and forth out to the planting grounds. Also, this boat was rigged for a West Coast trawler, and that was, we had 40-foot outriggers on the boat that went over the sides, leaned out, and that was the state's way of getting people back to Lake Huron to fish salmon. Everybody was going over to Lake Michigan, but they were planted about 5 years ahead of us, and everybody was catching fish over there. So they rigged this boat up, and we could tow up to 96 lures at a time. So then the fishermen would follow us out, and we would tell them where the thermocline was, because we had a thermobafograph that recorded the temperature of the water. And when we leave the port, especially Oscoda, we would have 10 or 12 little boats following us out. And as soon as we started catching fish, we would radio them and tell them what lures we were using. And it was quite an interesting job, but it was kind of boring. long hours of towing lures, yeah. So, and then after that, then we went into trawling, and so we would trawl the bottoms looking for little fish, and that took quite a bit of time finding bottoms that you could tow on, because you had to tow this net along the bottom, and you couldn't tow them over rocks, because if you hung up on rocks, it would tear the trawl. So it took us a while to find the grounds that we could tow the trawl in.
So would you spend days at a time on the boat, or?
Well, this boat would go out in the morning, come back in the evening. It was just a day boat.
Okay.
So, but when we were away from home, we would stay in motels and eat in restaurants. We never lived on a boat, and that was a good thing.
Right.
Nice to get away from her for a few hours.
Yeah, you need some space, you know.
Yeah.
So what did you think when you first found out that she would be retiring and replaced with the RV Tanner? What were some of your thoughts?
Well, she needed to be replaced. We were trying to replace her for a few years. She was, built in '47. Getting ripe in some spots, metal wearing through, and they had to replace part of the bottom here a few years back. So it was time to replace her, and so it was a good deal for the state of Michigan.
Absolutely, and it was a beautiful commissioning. I mean, were you able to see the christening and things like that when she was christened, the RV Tanner?
No, I haven't seen anything she has done yet.
Oh, do you think you'll get a chance?
Oh yeah. I usually go out 2 or 3 times a year.
Yeah, even though you're retired, you gotta stay on the boats.
Yeah, I love her, and I love this kind of work. So
awesome. So do you want to tell me a little bit about the work that you're now doing with the Bessemer Museum? It sounds like the Chinook's a little bit involved, but also another boat.
I'm running the committee at working on the Catherine V. And the Catherine V was an old fish tug built in 1928, and it was a wooden tug covered with a layer of steel. And when we went and looked at her, Chris got me interested in her because she knew I was a commercial fisherman, and she wanted to know if the Catherine V could be saved. So I went down and looked at her, and I said, well, let me get a couple of guys. And one of the guys I got picked up with Dick Silver, and him and I started on the boat. Excuse me, and we went down and looked at it and said, yeah, I think we can, repair her. So we started working on her. Then I got Phil Jordan and his wife to come down and look at it, and they decided if we cut the rails off, they could replace them. So I went and talked to Chris, and first I asked Phil how much he figured the rails would cost to put new rails on. He said, well, anywhere from $1,000 to $1,200. So I went and talked to Chris, and I said, Chris, how much money do we have? And she said $513 or $535. So then we had to have a fundraiser. So we have had 3 fundraisers, and each time we raised about $6,000. And that gave us enough money to redo the boat pretty much and put in new docks. And so now, hopefully next year, she'll be a exhibit for the museum, and with the Chinook coming over there, we can tell both parts of the story, you know, the fishery part and also the research.
That's really great. And I think my last question would be, I know she took her last voyage the other day and you were aboard, so how was that?
Good.
Yeah.
Good. She's a good little boat. She always brought you home, never had to worry about, you know, having her stall out there. She had a good engine in her and good crew on her.
Awesome. Well, I'm very glad to hear it, and thank you so much for sharing your part of the story with us.
Pleasure of mine.
And be sure to stay tuned because we'll be right back with more. Welcome back, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm now joined here with Chris Witulski, the Executive Director for the Besser Museum for Northeast Michigan. Thank you so much for being here. So do you want to tell me a little bit about the Besser Museum's involvement with the Chinook and how this whole exhibit is hopefully going to roll out?
Sure. About 12 years ago, 10 or 12 years ago, the Besser Museum received the wooden vessel, commercial fishing vessel, 1929 Catherine V. And the boat the intention was to build an exhibit to highlight commercial fishing industry in Northeast Michigan. Well, it sat for quite a while, and in 2011 and 12, we started looking at that project of how are we going to develop this exhibit. And Tuffy Cross was contacted, commercial fisherman, long history, and he got involved and joined our board. And that whole exhibit started to be developed, and in the midst of that development, we also created a statewide consortium called the Great Lakes Fisheries Heritage Consortium. And people can go online and Google that and see where there are other historic sites, historic vessels that are telling that part of the history. And so then along comes Jim Johnson. And he is a retired DNR fishery biologist. He and Tuffy worked together for their whole career almost, and the Chinook was being retired. And so they started talking about bringing that to the museum and it joining our Great Lakes Fisheries Heritage exhibit. And so the efforts of those 2 men are now coming to full circle of the Chinook coming to the Besser Museum and joining that exhibit. And we were only able to do this and tell this very unique story because of their direct relationship to the Besser Museum. And so we're excited because it's the second part of the story, that they've done research through the DNR for a very long time, and they have firsthand knowledge that they can bring to the exhibit.
And I heard that you're going to be leaving the Chinook as is, you know, the gloves hanging, the nets wherever they are, and maybe even being able to still turn on the engine when it's on land?
Right, and both engines actually. So that engine has a unique story that we're learning more about, and they want to be able to turn that on. And the Catherine V has a Cullenberg engine that is very unique, that is being restored and hopefully be able to start. So those are 2 more very unique features for our Great Lakes Fisheries Heritage exhibit that are goals that may come to be achieved. And it is going to be set to where it's like the guys are coming to work, and people are going to be able to learn what the DNR research vessels do for the health of the Great Lakes, the stocking of the fish, the collection of data, the research that is being done for the sea lamprey and how they're combating that invasive species, other invasive species. So a lot of times you see the boat go out, you hear, oh, the DNR, what exactly does the DNR Fisheries Division do? And the Besser Museum will be able to assimilate all that research information to the public, which I think strengthens what the DNR does and also educates what it takes to keep our Great Lakes healthy, to keep the fish stocked, and to provide not just commercial fishing, but also sports fishing.
It's almost like perfect timing for her to retire.
Yes.
So do you want to tell me a little bit, I keep hearing she has a great story to tell, and you were able to go on her last voyage the other day. Did that really help show you that she does have a story to tell, being able to hear her run and seeing her out there on the lake?
And all the equipment and the stories of the people that worked the boat. The same is true for the Chinook as it is for the Catherine V. We've been capturing oral histories of people who worked on the Catherine V. 91-year-old Harvey Klan from Rogers City had lots of information. So now we're translating that same format into the Chinook, where we are getting firsthand oral histories from people that actually worked on that boat, which will be beneficial for us now and into the future to preserve that history, to talk about our fisheries heritage, and for the Besser Museum to kind of be that focal point of all of these stories. There's such depth to what goes on out there that I don't know about you, but I'm not a real big boater. I've only been out into the Great Lakes a few times, but we live right on the shores. And so to bring that information to people like me that are like, what are they doing? What is this all about? It really creates a greater appreciation and understanding of this natural resource that all of us are right here on the shores but know little about. So getting people who have those firsthand stories like Jim Johnson, like Tuffy, and helping us build this exhibit is invaluable. It's just really a unique opportunity for us.
And then it's a big eye catcher, you know, you're gonna have that boat there. The kids are gonna love that, being able to check it out, absolutely.
And the ongoing partnership with the DNR. They're willing to work with us. They have a education department, a marketing department, the research department. So to have them partner with the Besser Museum and continue to tell their story. And as far as kids, like you mentioned, we're all about what are you going to be when you grow up? You know, are you going to go into DNR wildlife? At the museum, we really highlight the industries of Northeast Michigan, be it mining, be it lumbering, fishing, astronomy. There's so many things that when we're touring kids, what are you going to be when you grow up? How are you going to contribute to this rich legacy? So it's really fun for us to have this opportunity. One more component of the Great Lakes Fisheries Heritage Exhibit.
All right, so the big question, funding.
So funding is always a challenge. As you know, we're in the middle of our 50th anniversary capital campaign. Besser Museum is 50 years old. We are not on a millage. A lot of people are surprised to learn that Besser Museum isn't on a county millage or a state millage. We have to write for grants. We're funded partially by the Besser Foundation and by the generosity of the community. So we will pursue funding through grant opportunities. The Great Lakes Fisheries Trust, the DNR is going to help us a little bit in that. The Community Foundation helps us in pursuing grants. So it will be an ongoing thing. So if people are out there and interested in this part of their heritage and want to donate, come on in and see us, talk to us about how you can support the Great Lakes Fisheries Heritage Exhibit being developed and funded.
Awesome. And so this obviously isn't going to happen overnight. It might be, you know, but it seems like you guys are making the right strides.
Exactly. And even the Catherine V has been solely funded by the fundraisers that the Catherine V Committee has been putting on every year. So you need to get on our website, and there's videos on there that show of all the progress that they've made, ways that you can donate to the campaign or this exhibit. But yeah, it's all through the generosity and the hard work of passionate volunteers.
Awesome. I'm very excited to see how it turns out. Thanks again, Chris, for being here. We really appreciate it. And be sure to stay tuned next week for another edition of Insights.
Insights into Northeast Michigan is produced by WBKB News. If you have any comments, suggestions, or topics you would like to see on a future show, please email WBKB News. This has been a production of Thunder Bay Broadcasting Corporation. All rights reserved.